Technological Innovation and Free Knowledge. And our moderator is Praveen Das, who works in the Wikimedia Foundation.
I hope every one of you had a good lunch. I know it's a time for a good siesta, but we'll ensure that we keep this session very interactive, and we'll try to bring in any opinions from the audience as well in between. So it's going to be more of a casual talks, and let's not make it a specific speech kind of panel. So today we are going to discuss on the. I think we have enough. Thank you, Bhavji. So the panel discussion today is in the intersection of educational resources, technological innovation, and free knowledge. Education has evolved a lot, especially after, how the education was pre-pandemic, during pandemic, and post-pandemic. And these education basically, is a basic human right and are crucial factors in developing an individual as well as society. In today's panel, we'll discuss how it has evolved and what are the various ways and mechanisms which we can adapt to ensure that there's a free flow of information. And with that, I just wanted to open up today's panel. I would request panel members to, speakers to introduce themselves and also basically answer to this question on why do we need education resources and should they be free and how basically technology can help achieve this free knowledge. Over to you, Praveen.
Thank you, Praveen. I'm Praveen Garimella, so I work as the head of digital learning at the Indian School of Business. So I have been, working in this area of education technology and learning science for quite some time. So I'll quickly kind of give you what my view is on the education resources and accessibility and learning in particular, and then pass it on. So one of the things that in the learning science research, in terms of how people learn, that we have found is that it all depends on what the learner does and thinks, right? It all happens in the mind. So there's a lot of, knowledge out there, but that knowledge is not really illuminated unless the learner actually starts processing it, right? So I come more from this theory of how people process knowledge. How do we all process information? And then there's this entire stages of development, if you will, where we say that people go from being not aware of something to becoming an expert at it. So I've been studying all of these, and I'll try to bring in all of that into the conversation. And in terms of education resources, we have all today blessed with technology where we all learn just in time. If I don't know something, the first go-to place is search on Google. You get a little bit of information there, and you get excited. Go to Wikipedia page, learn about that, and then find a MOOC, and then learn a little more, and then kind of go on. So I think we have seen all of that. Today we all have access to that. And then we are also seeing that these tools are becoming a lot more interesting with the advances in AI, right? So there's this ChatGPT. I'm sure all of you have tried and experienced. If not, you should. It's fun on how you interact with knowledge now, because it doesn't always give you the right answers, but it's a good starting point. And we can also talk about a lot of, what prerequisite knowledge you need to have in order to use all these advances. So with that, I'll pass it on.
Thanks. My name is Santhosh. I work at the Wikimedia Foundation, specifically at the language team. I'm a principal engineer at the language team. My team work on various technology projects related to the language and the language related aspects. So I think all of you know that the vision of Wikipedia is to provide, the sum of all knowledge to everybody, right? And in all languages. So maybe I'm preaching to the choir, like I think everybody sitting here is completely aware of what is free knowledge and what is the importance, and I don't think anybody disagree that knowledge should not be free. Like if there is anybody, we can have a very interesting conversation. I would like to hear. So going back to the free knowledge, you might be knowing, but just to remind the definition, what is free knowledge? So it had its beginnings somewhat in the parallel with the free software movement, where free software movement defined free software as something that everybody can write, everybody can share, reuse, redistribute, that kind of freedoms, four kind of freedoms. So the definition of free knowledge also somewhat related. It talks about access to knowledge and the rights to share, redistribute, not restricted by any economical or any kind of technical barriers. So those things are very important when we are talking about access to knowledge in all kinds of language and making that available for everybody. So what Wikipedia did in this whole movement about free knowledge is like, first of all, we need to acknowledge that Wikipedia is not the full source of all the information in the world, or it's just, it provided two things. First of all, it provided a model where community can come together and create this knowledge and provide an easy way to access it in various languages. So that, I think that's one of the big contribution. The second contribution is the result of the first one, like it created a big knowledge repository. So these two models acts as like a North Star about the like a free knowledge movement. But at the same time, we really need to acknowledge that there are a lot of knowledge outside Wikipedia that is not in Wikipedia, and that also in various formats that was not predominant when Wikipedia started 22 years ago. Like Wikipedia is just textual. We had several conversations about multiple ways knowledge is represented these days. So I think the question about whether knowledge should be free, I think I need not explain, because we had in the previous conversation, people were clearly explaining the requirements, like every civilization, one generation after another generation grows on top of the knowledge accumulated, and because the knowledge is freely transferred across the generation, we prosper. And if you are not sharing, we are slowing the progress, we are forgetting things, and we are not going fast. Secondly, in the age of knowledge and internet, access to knowledge became kind of a classifier, like where you are in the society. So I will not go to the details, but just wanted to qualify these basic terms about the free knowledge. And my role in Wikimedia Foundation is to develop technology. So I'm mostly interested in the technology that facilitates this dissemination of the free knowledge to all languages. So I'll pass to.
Thank you, Santhosh. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sameera Wijerathna from Sri Lanka. I represent Dialog Axiata PLC, the largest telecommunication company in Sri Lanka. So my take on what you said, Praveen. Now think of knowledge part, knowledge creation and knowledge dissemination. So both has a cost involved in it, but what you mentioned about the pandemic situation, but think of like the technology, what the role technology played in that. Maybe I think how you experienced the pandemic, why we saw what going on in India. I think you saw what's going on in Sri Lanka. Okay, so we sort of had the very same experiences with that. So I don't want to explain, but in both countries, I believe you will agree with me. The education, did we keep the full stop to the education during that time? Okay, no, how we kept that going, thanks to the kind of digital content, online content, maybe sources like, maybe Wikipedia and all those, which kept that going. The technology can do a lot in it. Whether it's, maybe let's get to the argument of, whether it's free, whether it's paid, maybe all those. But what we experience there, the free as well as paid, technology-driven education in terms of the dissemination of the knowledge played a key role there. Okay, so if we look at what else we can do, I think maybe it taught us good lessons. Maybe pandemic, let's see the bright side of it. That showed us good lessons, what else we can do and what else we can continue. Maybe then now we are in the post-pandemic, like I don't see except one or two wearing mask. Actually, I brought my mask, my mask was there, and I think free mask was given to everyone, right? But I don't think that many wearing, only except one or two, because like that era is gone. But there was very good lessons from that pandemic situation, especially on education, especially on digital content, especially on digital education knowledge delivery. Okay, so I think continuation of that, building on that is what we need to focus on. Probably in the next rounds, we can discuss those.
Thank you. Hi everyone, this is Bhuvana Meenakshi. I run a self-help cooperative called the Women in Tech Collectives India, and also co-founder of the Emergibility, which includes people from the neurodiverse backgrounds to be involved in tech, and we craft out various teaching and mentoring elements that could also include neurodiverse communities, like making them more into diverse and inclusive groups. So as part of reaching technology as an education or a curriculum, so while we took education to women from marginalized backgrounds, there's always been challenges of social stigma, or could be even creating a smaller digital infrastructure for them to do a basic open source contribution, or let it be in terms of reaching any particular goal out of it, or even getting trained in a specific skill set, right? So over the pandemic, that's where we initiated the whole concept of this Women in Tech Collectives, and it's more of trying to make things possible that you're not being restricted to a physical environment to get dependency, or to get that source of education from let's say a very formal type, or a place where you have time-bound restrictions, or a place that you're not feeling safe. So that's exactly what we wanted to address, and that's where we wanted universities, institutions, and other formal types of educational forums to adapt open source as part of their curriculum and take this forward, and how mentors and trainers could also be mapped with these essential parts of learning ecosystems and make them more inclusive is what I've been working on for a while, and looking forward to discuss more about this as well. Thank you.
That's really nice. We have academia, we have tech, and community. I think you all are going to enjoy the conversation today. We have been talking about free knowledge. I wanted to know from Praveen, you and Sameera, when does this knowledge become free? We're talking about free knowledge. When it becomes free, is there someone who decides it needs to be free? Is it only at the behest of the organizations and institutions to make it free?
All right. So I think when I think about knowledge, right, so there are two things. One is there is knowledge which is written in the books and various resources that we have. Some of those books, you'll have to go buy them. You may not have access in some cases. They're probably very old. There are all kinds of things that go on. But I think to me what happens is, let's say when I go through an educational experience, or I do my own research, or maybe in terms of work, I end up assimilating a lot of this knowledge, and I also have conversations. I collaborate with people, and then there are discussions. There's talk around knowledge. So I see every little bit of what I said is knowledge, right? It is captured and coded in a certain way. Now, again, I'll take the human learning-centered aspect of it, right? So all of that knowledge is out there in the world, and there's some knowledge in your head. Now, how do you assimilate it? A lot is known, but there's a lot more to be known in terms of how humans really process information and assimilate. there are ways in which we encode knowledge, in our mind, and that's very different from how you do it and how it is written somewhere else.
So when you say encoding, is it processing information in your head?
Yeah, it is a way of processing what information is out there, and then you assimilate, you infer something from it. And that is kind of limited by your perception, right? And then you encode that little bit in your head, and you start applying it. Now, that's how we do that. Now, when we say sum of all the knowledge, now what is that? What are various things we should add up, right? I think it's not just the repositories which are out there. It's also what we have encoded as a human race, right? And all of that is knowledge. And how do we get access to it? I think there are several pathways. And that's how I see how knowledge is represented. And I think it takes several forms. There are very few forms that we probably perceive, right? And I think we are all limited by that perception.
One point about that one. I just want to talk about the free in this one. So the one definition of free is always about like it should be easy to share, everybody can distribute, but coming with the actual meaning, the other meaning of free, like the cost. So if you talk about an abstract concept called knowledge and talk about the cost of knowledge, I think as an abstract concept, the cost of the knowledge is often associated with its curation, its storage, its dissemination. And when we say a free-flowing knowledge in the society so that everybody can access without their financial or technical background, this means it comes with zero cost as in the price. Mostly it means the society finds a mechanism where this kinds of cost to produce knowledge, store and distribute, they find a mechanism where the cost is not high, and they find a mechanism where this can be collectively distributed among all the beneficiaries. So these two aspects are important, the two meanings of free. Because of the English, free has two meanings. Other languages has two words for that one. But there are several models across the world, not limited to Wikipedia, where this cost of production, curation, dissemination, and all of these costs are subsidized or made free using various models. And Wikipedia is just one model for that one.
Yeah, I have a kind of different opinion. In the morning we heard, knowledge is political. Hassan, I think I remember saying. So think of knowledge. Knowledge always has a value to that. It has a cost to that. Maybe that knowledge, the creation, knowledge dissemination. Maybe if we look at Sri Lankan example, I think, I don't know, India, you to some extent, I guess you have the free education, but Sri Lanka, believe me, it's free education. From your primary, secondary, tertiary, they come to a university like this, they don't spend a single cent. Okay, so why? Okay, why? So as a country, we see that as an investment. Why we disseminate knowledge free? It's not actually free. Someone somewhere pays for it. Okay, as citizens, we pay taxes to get our next generation educated. So it is not free. Their delivery, for them, the recipient as a recipient, they get it free. But someone somewhere has paid the bill. Okay, but maybe your education system, why Google is managed by Sundar Pichai. It's the kind of the knowledge system you had here, which generated resources, the skill set, which go and manage the global big entities like that. So that when we look at it, knowledge. Multiple, maybe even the gain knowledge. I was talking to some kids here, during my lunch and all those. Some, come all the way from somewhere else to Hyderabad, all the way here to study at IIIT. So just think of maybe they pay something here for their studies, but there will be a cost involved around it. That is, we call transaction cost. Okay, maybe think if someone from Delhi, come in here, or maybe Chennai come in here, so they need to stay somewhere, they need to find their old foods, and the transaction cost involved in it. So knowledge, it's most of the time, it's outside visible or not, it has a cost involve it. Maybe I'll give you a simple, very quick example from Sri Lanka. What we did was, Sri Lanka, similar setup like yours. They are like maybe rural schools. We have 10,000 schools there, 10,154 schools. So no science teachers, no maths teachers, things like that. So maybe they Ministry of Education approach us and ask, can you help us on this? But can we produce science teachers? No. Can we build more schools, more buildings, give science lab? No. So what we said was, we can't do any of those. But we will give you alternative solution to make that education more affordable and create this free content. So what we did was, even in rural Sri Lanka, now I think the situation is much improved, but we don't have 4G, 3G in there. So, but we have the satellite. I think we use the Indosat. So we use a satellite. We have the satellite television business as well. So what we did was, we got ministry to develop the best teachers to develop this content. Actually, we brought some of them to Indira Gandhi Open University GNU here as well to train them. So develop best content, put it through satellite, which cover the whole Sri Lanka. Okay, so that is free. That is given free. That is facilitated by us, a public-private partnership. But that we look at, maybe as a government, as Sri Lanka, we look at it as an investment. Not actually, maybe it's paid by someone else.
Got it. I think that's a wonderful point. Now coming back to you, Santhosh, you mentioned about two different, kind of free knowledge system in general. And I wanted to understand how these free knowledge are beneficial for the communities. And probably I would like to, reach out to Bhuvana also here. Since you work with diverse group, how these content are basically consumed by them and the society in general and the communities who work around it, either in building those or in consuming those. So
yeah, I think answering that may be easy if we use some examples. So for example, access to knowledge, how it can be beneficial, it has different manifestations. Maybe one example I can give is like, again, based on Wikipedia. So Wikipedia had this essential vaccines that everybody should have. We have a list of articles related to essential vaccines. And I need not explain the importance of vaccines, right? But it's important only to a person only if that person knows about it, right? And in their own language. And we have so many languages, and English is just a small language spoken only by a small percentage of the people in the world. So we had a project, actually community had a project, but we helped using technology to translate the articles about the essential vaccines to so many languages so that people can read about it in their own language, understand the benefits about this one, and remove the confusions about all those things and get benefit from that one. So that means it's just an example like how access to knowledge in their own mother tongue that they can understand, and that knowledge they have access for free helps the general benefit of, in this case, health of the society.
But here, so I just wanted to bring in one more point. Just wanted to bring in one more point. Whenever it comes to free knowledge, our understanding is probably the knowledge is not at the par. The material is not at par with the paid one. How do you, differentiate this, or how would you, build a narrative which says that free knowledge is at par with the knowledge which is basically given in the institution? And probably I'll bring in here, your opinion as well on this. So.
Yeah, so another nature of the knowledge is it's not static. It's always changing. It's improving. It's improved by science and research all the time. And because of this one, knowledge is standalone. It needs its own support from its own, how do you know that something is true, something is not right, something is something that you can believe. So this is where we need some models. Like there is a general tendency, like in the older generation who are not into internet, like if anything is written, like in printed, there is a tendency that people to believe it's true, right? So that tendency is there. But the internet, when it comes, everything is on the screens and everything is rendered. And then we had developed some models where people can check and make sure that content can be corrected. So that means it's not static. It can be corrected. Sometimes it can be wrong. So, but there is a mechanism by which people can correct, and there is a mechanism by which, instead of you saying that this is the correct information, this is the quality information, or this is the best information about something, what you provide is that some set of tools and models where a reader can use those things to assess whether it is correct or not. So that's where I think free knowledge did some innovation, where instead of, we had encyclopedia and we had books before, right? But one step up from this model is like, we also, along with the text, along with the knowledge, we also provide models and tools where people can verify, measure the quality of these things and makes sense of that by themselves. I think that's one, that is one way where people assess the knowledge, the quality of the free knowledge compared to all other knowledge that you can access. So it's like building a model of trust, building a model of quality and reliability based on this model of interaction by the community members.
Can I take it for Praveen, and then we'll be talking.
Sure. So I think, we've talked about this issue of you have knowledge and providing knowledge, free of cost. There's a purpose associated with that, and someone would justify. Now, when you're making all of this available for free, there's still a cost to maintain it, right? Someone has to pay for it. I think we talked about that. Now today, that was few decades back where we are struggling to get any knowledge onto, an accessible format. But today we are, having this overload of information around us. We are dealing with things like everyone has a smartphone. They can start, tweeting or posting information out there. And not just that, people are able to find it very fast, right? Even without you asking for it, right? And so there are ways in which all of this information is coming in. And all of this creates, an opportunity for people to process that and then make sense of it. So, the real question to me is that how do we, control for this? How do we make sure that you have all of this knowledge, information that's available? How do we kind of train people to not fall for any fake news and fake information? Accuracy is at stake, and be able to kind of, validate it for yourself, right?
It's like building a solution.
Yeah, so I think to me, the most important solution here is in the schools, somehow we are always teacher-led, instructor-led. If we can go from there to, empowering people to learn, right? How do you learn? And provide those critical thinking skills, saying if someone presents some piece of knowledge, can I critically think about that and say that I don't believe this is true, versus, I start validating. I build some skills to go do my own research to see if that is accurate. Now here we definitely, have some roadblocks, right? Maybe the most basic information is all out there, but as you go with the granularity, right, you go more precise, try to get more precise information. That's where, you need, sometimes when you're doing research, you need access to journal articles, some journal article which is out there, and you probably need a subscription. Or you talk to people who have worked on it. Today it's easy to send out an email to the author and say that, hey, I looked at the abstract of your paper, I want to talk more about it. There are occasions where people respond back, given how much time you have. I think all of these are ways to still, get access to knowledge. I don't think it stops because something, you can't pay for something and you can't get access to it. If you see, MIT probably started the open education resources, their open courseware. The initial days of MIT open courseware, although they assume a lot of students around the world will go access the resources, it turned out that the initial days of OC, W was more faculty going and accessing, and then making use of those as examples. In fact, I wouldn't mind getting inspired from some example or some assignment or a project which is used in courses, and then use it in my class, right? And that's a perfectly acceptable model because it stimulates learning, and it's a very good example. So, I mean, today if you kind of go forward, I mean, OER again has become huge. A lot of repositories for open education resources. People are posting their courses, their whatever artifacts they create for education. So I think the more, and it continues. There's already a framework for people to kind of continue posting a lot of this.
So you talk about, you spoke about OER, we'll get to that. We have our one more speaker who was not able to attend us in person, but have sent a voice note which is related to OER. We'll touch base on that, but Bhuvana, before that, your views on, in general of what do you think, if the existing knowledge is inferior to the closed system of knowledge. Also, why, along with it, I wanted to understand how the neurodiverse group, basically perceive these kind of knowledge, or in terms of building knowledge, when it comes to development of knowledge, how these knowledge systems need to be built, which basically ensures that it is, like everybody is able to understand that. Like Praveen did mention about, faculty, instead of everyone, just faculties referred to the certain set of knowledge which was created. So I'm sure there was some certain kind of blockers. Was it only created for certain set of audiences? Can it be more, mellowed it down, and so on and so forth?
Right. So in general, so while we talk about the FOSS communities or like the free and open knowledge system, there are three key factors which I think is normally to be considered, where it is mainly around reachability, accessibility, and affordability. So where in the different instances of like, starting with like how we've been doing with the WITC, where, like creating like smaller computers, like creating, using Raspberry Pi and making them, giving them affordable computers to get things started at least, or like to get the access, like say if there is an open source library with the MIT or like with the IIT Kharagpur library or any of those, it may matter. The first phase of like, getting access to it, and also to know, basically get that knowledge of, what I need to explore and how I need to explore is like the fundamental sort of awareness that's more required while it comes to in terms of like reachability of this open knowledge ecosystem itself. And also while you say about the you asked about the neurodiverse, how do we reach to them? So of course there are a lot of barriers again there in terms of like, making various like in terms of like, sorry, I forgot your name. Santhosh rightly said about the localized languages where we need to, that's one of the things. The other way is like, we're trying experiments around like how to give people with braille keyboards and track ball mouse to help them in easily type or like involved. So where we have found this as a bit of more optimal way to enrich this context to the neurodiverse is like by involving them into the content generation itself, and look upon what challenges they face, and in turn how this works for them, and helping them be part of different user research works that's more done for like assistive technologies for them. So when I also like recently met with a few of the founders of two companies from who just incubated from the IITM, who do assistive prosthetics and tracking eye softwares for different assistive methods. So, I mean, the place where I also find this as a challenge is, the affordability, where, I completely understand about like what goes in. I'm not talking that, paid sort of like content or like hardware support or anything of that is not of the quality, or in terms of like they are not in par with the open source, but then making them more access to these people, or at least trying to make them with the inclusive models of by involving these people is something that is still I find it as a gap in these type of content or technologies that is being meant to address the specific sort of marginalized and neurodiverse communities.
Great. So now I would like to go to our speaker, Nichole Saad, who's a senior manager at education team at Wikimedia Foundation. We'll hear the voice note on open education resources and her views on that.
The Wikimedia Foundation. Today I'm going to address the question, what is the role of open access in promoting equitable access to knowledge? And I want to first address this by sharing a story that I've shared in the past, but that I think demonstrates where we are and where we can be by investing in OER. I used to work as a teacher trainer in a few different countries. Once I was working with a group of teachers and we were addressing some challenges they were having with classroom management. I shared a framework that had been helpful for me in the past, and they were very reluctant to try it because the actual resources available about the method only showed it being demonstrated in Western classrooms. I searched and finally found a video of a teacher in Palestine using the method to support her students with success. And because that teacher was working in a context with more similarities to that of my teachers, they became enthusiastic about trying the method for themselves. Still today, much of the educational content available to support both educators and students represents a small minority of classrooms around the world. The images don't reflect people's realities. The examples used don't help students connect the learning to their lived experiences. The language of print aren't the languages that people speak at home. All of this impacts learning outcomes, leading to poor quality education. The promise of open educational resources is not just that they are free. It's the promise of representation, of relevance, and reusability. Through OER, it's easier to create resources that can be adapted to different contexts. There's no publisher with a copyright telling you that you can't change the pictures or insert a more relevant example. We can collaborate to make sure that the resources are relevant to our students and that the information is up to date. We can easily correct errors. We don't have to wait for a new edition. We can edit it ourselves. We can take the bits that work and we can leave out the bits that don't. And we can more easily reuse content that has been created already because of this right built into OER that says we can reuse, remix, repurpose, and redistribute. Let me give an example. In 2020, my team at the Wikimedia Foundation collaborated with Wikimedians in Bolivia, Morocco, and the Philippines to produce a teacher training program with associated educational resources, all published under open licenses. We were able to first publish in 4 languages with adaptations for 3 different countries. Then we supported more volunteers and communities to adapt the resources with guidance and training on adaptation tools like Figma, for example. Now the OERs associated with the program are available in 14 languages, including some indigenous languages, and even more adaptations are already underway. These resources have been used to promote media and information literacy and the use of Wikipedia as a learning tool by trainers in more than 30 countries. And this is what we can do together when we aren't restricted by the boundaries of traditional publishing and freely share and collaborate as a community of educators. So I hope that when you think of OER, you think of it not just as something that's free, but as something that we are freely able to participate in creating together. And by doing so, making education more accessible, more relevant, and enhancing learning outcomes at the end of the day. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think OER definitely, is the thing for the future. We're just not consuming the content, but also helping in developing the content. With that, I'll move to the next question on, since with this technology advancement, accessing learning resources has become very easy, adaptation is easy. Nichole definitely gave one example, on that line. What is the impact of technology on the accessibility and the quality of educational resources? This is open to, all the panelists.
So I think with respect to the technology and how we are able to access knowledge, I think the most exciting times is with respect to how the AI-based tools are shaping up. It's still very, very new. We have experienced something like an interactive, a conversational agent like ChatGPT. So, and that presumably captures a lot of knowledge which is already out there in digital form. Now, how can we leverage on that, and that too in education? Like one of the things we heard from Nichole's OER talk is, how do you foster learning outcomes given that you do have access to all of this? Now that's a whole different set of issues. How do you interact with this knowledge which is already out there? How do you, pick up the most relevant things and provide it, and so on? And the relevance and fostering learning outcomes, I think, are very personalized. I learn in a way which is very different from every one of you in this room. There are differences, and those depend on what our prior background is and what our knowledge, abilities and skills are. So the question is, how do we start using all of these in educational settings? Now there's a huge debate on whether you can use these. Are we at that prime time to using any of this in the classrooms? A lot of educators are also worried about students actually directly going to these tools, getting the results from there and then submitting it as though it is theirs, right? And a lot has to be understood on how these tools become relevant. And I believe personally that it's a great opportunity for us to explore this space, because it solves for personalization, which means when I have a question, the best way I can get an answer to it is when I talk to an expert in that field. Now, how many of us have access to an expert in the field? Not many of us, because that's way too expensive in terms of time. So now here is one approach where you can start interacting, although there's an expert or a presumed expert on any particular area. Now when you start interacting with it, and if it can start giving you some results, although a little bit of it may be incorrect, right? Or maybe more than that is incorrect. The question is, again, it boils down to, do I have the right skills to process that information and make sense of it? If I do have the right skills to do that, then I have a superpower here, where I have an expert sitting all the time. Although the expert is wrong, I can figure out when the expert is wrong and decide for myself, right? So you could kind of start imagining a lot of these new scenarios to bring in that personalization. And how do these tools actually access this information? There's some way of, again, encoding knowledge for these tools to generate text for you. We call it hallucinations, right? These bots are essentially thinking they're right, and then they're just saying things. But ultimately it is for us to figure out if we can really make use of whatever is being said. I also see it as a very good opportunity for learning outcomes, because, of course, supervised by an expert, is that you kind of keep presenting good and bad examples of something, right? The question is, are you able to figure out that this is the right example for a given concept, or this is a wrong example? That itself kind of says that you're critically thinking, reasoning over all of these examples. I think there are a lot of pieces in this puzzle. One is knowledge. I think a lot of information is already out there. A lot can go there. I think there are a lot of frameworks which are already taking information there. And we need to figure out, and there's also technology to rapidly access exactly what you want. Now the question is, how do we make use of it and then, thrive, given that we have all these tools?
Yeah, about the impact of the technology on the education, I want to talk about the classroom transformations happened that was accelerated by the pandemic. So technology was already there, but what pandemic did is like making that, you do not have a choice of not using that technology. That internally made them like very good at the technology for using this for all kind of education. So what happened is that technology became an essential part of classroom education, and that had a massive, not only limited to the pandemic time, kind of a long-term transition of how you provide education, how students and even teachers, how they use technology. And it also had an explosion on the available knowledge or available instructors that you have access to. For example, in some of the states, when government gave online tutorials or something, they got the best teachers. So now that best teacher is available for everybody in that state. So similarly, this access, they are not limited by the instructors that are present in their classroom, but they are suddenly opened up with the gates of like access to the best knowledge in any specific domain all over the world, not even limited to the geography. This transformation has no reversal, I believe, because even though pandemic is in its different state, but this transformation of how you use knowledge, how education is happening, it has transformed a lot. I think that will be the one of the changing moment of technology transformed education.
Yeah, the question you asked, Praveen, maybe I'll put that back to the audience. Anyone remember what is the India's position in world ranking of Wikipedia page views? We heard in the morning. Shout. You can feel free to shout. Second. Any other answers? Fourth? Fifth? Okay.
This is the top 5.
You can't answer. Wikipedians can't answer. Okay. So I heard 3 different answers. Thank you very much. So maybe the person who said from here, now like see how the information flows. Okay. So the right answer is 5th place. Okay. So no doubt India having the 5th place because main contributor is your population. You have that many people, right? What would be the second contributor? Anyone can guess? Sorry. No, my question is, don't think about population, okay? My question is, India has ranked as 5th country, which in terms of the number of pages views on Wikipedia, okay? So you to get to the 5th place, there is no doubt your population has contributed to that, because do you have that many people accessing it too? So many people accessing it. What could be the second reason you to get to the 5th place? Accessibility, okay. Mobile phone access. Data cost. Okay. So, okay. A lack of, okay, I heard like I'm coming from business community. Okay. So if I get this all, answers together, if I try to generalize that answer, it is something to do with technology. This is the answer you were looking for, Praveen. Okay? So what technology can play in this whole education delivery? So she was talking about 3 things. We talk about in our work, we talk about 4A principle. Whatever we do, let's say whether it's digital education or any digital work, whether it's applicable, you need to ask those questions from yourself. What I am going to do, whether it's applicable for like masses, whether it's available for masses, whether it's affordable for masses, okay, and whether it's accessible for masses, accessible for the intended community, okay. So here in India, what you have got right, yes, your population and the knowledge and all those, but maybe there was a gentleman from Geo this morning, and he came and said, you have the lowest data price in the world. But let me to maybe, with all due respect to him, like independent ranking, you are in the 5th position in terms of the data cost. You are the 5th cheapest in the world. Okay, so that definitely has become a driver getting this your place of 5th position. Because think of if this is yeah, I like that enthusiasm. Cheapest is in Israel. Okay, it is $0.04 there. So it is 5G. It's whole country is covered with 5G. $0 per GB. So you are is like in, if I say in Indian rupees, it's like 10 rupees. You are paying somewhere around 10 rupees per GB. Okay, so it is $0.17. Somewhere there like maybe it could be in between 10 to like 12 kind of rupees. So that has become a major driver. So what I was telling you is, when you look at when the technology, the role what technology can play, applicability, maybe let's say you need to just see what based on what you do. Accessibility, technology can do major thing. Now the previous example what I told you is maybe rural part of Sri Lanka, you don't have the broadband. Okay, so we go through satellite. Okay, so that is accessibility. And the affordability. Affordability is technology can do major stuff. Okay, because you will have, now think of free Wikimedia, it's free, right? But think of prerequisites, someone need to have access to Wikipedia. Just because of you want to have get that knowledge, would that come to you? No, you need to find your own maybe laptop, mobile phone, some access device, right? Just access device solve that problem? No. Then you need to have the connectivity. Okay, so then you need to find your connectivity. So there are multiple things which technology can help you to sort of benefit. So always we need to keep those, if you keep those 4A principles in your mind, I think what you can do, maybe the even very first question you asked, free education is open and all those. Think of the kind of peripheries around it. So just because of, maybe something become free, it doesn't mean that is free. Okay, so there are so many other, that's what I meant by transaction cost. There are so many other stuff which you need to consider when you're trying to making free knowledge available. Okay, hope I answered your question.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry.
Can you also add an aspect of, the role of this open access in promoting equitable access to knowledge? So the role of open access in providing equitable access to, promoting equitable access to knowledge to everyone. How do we see it?
Right.
Quickly, we'll wrap it up in 2 minutes and then we'll take any questions if.
Okay, fine. Just that furthering down with, in line with education policies that has been also reached out to, various, audience throughout the country, and in terms of understanding these, I could quickly take a reference from the new education policy as well. So this particular policy, while I explored, has, when I try to search about what's open and open source and knowledge has to do with the new education policy and how it could widely reach to various audience. So there's just the mention about the NIOS and the ODL modules, like the National Institute of Open Learning and the Open Distance Learning, which has been there for quite a long time, even before this pandemic has happened. And but again, if that we go further down to understand where or the resources these materials include, or like being or actually the content that is being utilized for in order to reach to various people, is again where there is this lack of understanding or lack of inclusion of open like OER, or like even there is barely reference to Wikimedia projects or like Wikimedia, there are so many wide open research works and stuff that's happening, but then the references to these are like, making these accessible as part of these, widely accessed education policies, could be a sort of like a, consideration, or like, could avail opportunities for people to access as an open knowledge, is what from my perspective.
Thank you, Bhuvana. We'll quickly take 2 questions, if there are any. Yes.
Hi, I'm Debanand Mishra from IIT Delhi. So, I guess there is one narrative about, I can say, pro-social behavior driving access to free knowledge, etc. But at the same time, there's also knowledge-based economies. Knowledge as a source of competitive advantage, knowledge as a source of market growth, knowledge as a source of innovation. So both these dynamics are at play in the society. Now, I just want to hear some of your views about who do you think is the moderator? Right? They have been there always, they will continue to be there. And who do you think is the moderator other than the government? We can always look to policies to balance this out. But besides the government, who else?
Who would want to take this question? Academia, technology?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't mind. Okay, but I really like what you said. Maybe that's why maybe Praveen and me disagree. Okay, coming to free knowledge. So it has been, as you correctly said, even from the history. Maybe think of Nalanda and your Takshila. People paid for that, right? It wasn't free. Maybe it was the Oxford in the history. It was like Oxford in the history. People came from other countries also. They paid a bill for that. There was a cost involved. So whether it is free versus the maybe closed knowledge, who should be sort of be governing that? I have a kind of a different view on that. My view is it is to be governed by or rather selected by the recipient. They will decide where to go. Okay, they will decide which will grow. Okay, so it is based on what we give it. Okay, so that's maybe that's why it has maybe last centuries how it behave. No matter how far we tried, why one end didn't sort of lose or win, why both continued, because there was a pro segment, there is a against segment. So that has been continued in the history and will continue in the future as well.
Any other take on that?
So I don't have. So I was thinking about the governance aspect in terms of the competitive advantage, right? I think patents and all of these have been there. You protect intellectual property. There is a system for that. All of that is all right. But I mean, if you have to look at Web3 type of situations, right, where people are trying to decentralize a lot of this behavior. So think about having no intermediary at all, but then somehow we self-organize. And I don't know what that system could be, but just imagining if there is a way of self-organizing and dealing with how one gets access to information, I think that might be the best solution, because then you are not kind of putting the power in one place and then you're getting all worried about it. That's my take on how I think it should be.
Unfortunately, governments also can no longer be trusted to be a moderator.
Very well said. So with that, we'll, okay, you have a question? Quickly take that one, yeah.
So first of all, thanks all of you for this wonderful session. My question is that there is a open knowledge or free knowledge, and there is a intellectual property concept. intellectual property right concept. Both are contradictory. Do you find any similarity between these two? And second is, if a person is contributing in open source, how can he or she grow in financially? Thank you.
So 2 questions was not allowed. However, Santhosh, if you want to answer this.
Yeah, I think the intellectual property is a covering term for different things like copyright, patent, and several other things. I think the free knowledge domain is often covered by the copyright. That is mostly by the permissible copyright licenses, where you allow the essential freedoms that you need for the existence of the free knowledge, and also at the same time protecting the rights of whoever curated that content, like whoever edited that content, by providing the copyright, by sharing all the copyright. I think in that perspective, I don't see how free knowledge can be in conflict with the intellectual property rights, because the definition of the free knowledge and in the legal nature of the free knowledge in terms of the license exists within the intellectual property rights in most of the countries. I think I have not seen any challenge for the invalidity or validity of the Creative Commons license that we are using. I think it's a perfectly healthy situation there. What was the second question? The
Financial benefit to the contributors.
Oh, okay, yeah. Contributing to the open source and its financial benefits, right? I think just like, it also goes to the meaning of the free, the two meanings. It often goes like, doesn't mean that the software that you are producing is free for everybody to use or anything. The cost for production, and that also involves like paying somebody to do that one, is always somehow in one way or another way it should be met. There is no doubt for that one. Like, I mean, there is nobody going to write anything for free, because the thing is like there may not be like direct payment. It will be incentivized in a different way. One of the nature of the software is like you don't need to produce it to run 10 times to run in 10 computers. So it's the marginal cost of producing once and then running everywhere. It's there. So producing once, it should be, the cost of that production should be handled by somebody who is invested on that one, and that is one way of open source is working. The second way is like no matter whether you produce the open source, the story does not end there. It needs to be run on computers. It needs to be supported. It need to be consulted. It need to be used in the context of different domains, and that's where the expertise of these open source contributors are going, and that's where they are paid.
Just to add to the
30 seconds.
Oh yeah, okay. Just to add to the second question of like making this into business prototype or sort of that. So of course that you need to pay for the maintenance or the production or the human labor that goes into it, and ultimately, these business models, like while you in turn these products target open source communities, again, in order for them to contribute and develop as a whole. So that's how the whole flow follows, and also to maintain the regulations, as in like for what intention that particular product is being spanned to a business, is also sort of the main thing that goes into this while you make it for monetary purposes.
Thank you. So, the rise of digital resources and open source technology basically presents a new opportunity for all of us to come and collaborate to build a new, model for building digital resources. With that, I want to thank all the panelists here. Thank you so much, and thanks audience for listening to us.
I would like to call Runa Bhattacharya and Rachit Sharma to come and felicitate the panelists and the moderator.
You all are feeling sleepy?